Leonie emerged through the now broken door into the village she had selected to summon the creature known as Jason in. As she stepped out, she witnessed several buildings engulfed in flames, while Jason stood in the center of the square, wielding a monstrous weapon with both hands. He pivoted back and forth, effortlessly dispatching any new attackers who approached him. With each turn, the weapon, dubbed Millie, obliterated the raiders who dared to confront him, even those shielded, as they turned a corner. Observing from a distance, Leonie cursed herself for bringing such a destructive force to the village. She watched as Jason directed his fire towards a wall, shredding stone and wood, causing 3 raider bodies to drop on the other side. It was then she realized the enormity of the weapon's power and the danger it posed. As a brief shower of arrows came from a nearby building, Jason ducked behind a tall monument and shouted tauntingly at the raiders, questioning their treatment of the innocent villagers. In response, a second volley of arrows rained down on him, prompting him to switch his weapon to a staff-like device with a flaming tip. From a belt-like harness, he retrieved a small cylinder and issued a stern ultimatum to the raiders, demanding they surrender within 5 seconds or face dire consequences. Leonie, uncertain of Jason's intentions, used a detection spell to confirm no innocents were inside the building. She commanded Jason to proceed with the attack, only to be surprised when he questioned her order, defying the subjugation magic she had imposed. Despite her confusion, she nodded in confirmation. Jason appeared hesitant, but ultimately hurled the small object towards the building, summoning a cloud of fog followed by a blaze of fire that consumed the raiders' refuge completely. Disarming himself and sighing with satisfaction, Jason remarked on the aftermath with a touch of humor, proclaiming his appreciation for the scent of alchemist fire in the morning. Turning back to Leonie, he marched over, visibly agitated, demanding an explanation for her orders. Feeling intimidated, Leonie quickly reviewed the magic circle and confirmed her spell should have compelled Jason to obey without question. Her mind raced as she realized Jason's resistance wasn't due to magical prowess but rather a lack thereof. His origin world devoid of mana, rendering him immune to magical control. Recognizing the gravity of her error, Leonie cautiously stood her ground. She realized she had unwittingly summoned a creature with an arsenal of unstoppable weapons, capable of wreaking havoc beyond her control. Despite her initial fear, she composed herself, offering Jason an apologetic smile and speaking in a soothing tone. She thanked him for saving the village, though she foresaw its abandonment due to the devastation caused. Acknowledging Jason's strength and seeking to maintain his cooperation, she assured him of future rewards for his efforts. However, Jason remained skeptical, his expression betraying doubt as he processed her words and intentions. Here's a rewritten version with more detail and clarity. The creature kept its gaze fixed on her, then sighed before removing its helmet. As it did, a shock of pale blonde hair and rounded ears were revealed. It ran its hand through the hair a few times, tucking the helmet under its arm. Finally, it looked back up and spoke with a measured tone. "Okay, I don't really believe you, but you are the only source of information available to me. Answer some of my questions first, and then I'll decide if I will assist your nation." Normally, such decisions would be handled by my superiors or government, but it seems I may be the only representative here. The word human echoed oddly in her mind, recalling a race long gone, destroyed by the Xander shortly after the world's creation eons ago, during the tumultuous early ages when thousands of races existed. She filed that thought away for later consideration and smiled gently before responding. "Of course, you must have many questions. My world is likely very different from yours. Firstly, the Quantics are known as slavers. We've established that. But I must ask about your nation. You do not engage in slave trade, correct?" The creature asked slowly, studying her expression as intensely as she was studying him. She detected concern, or perhaps sorrow in its gaze. "No, my nation does not partake in slavery," she replied calmly. "We have bond familiars and summonable beasts, but no slaves." The creature nodded thoughtfully, turning slightly away before facing her again with a hint of hesitation. "Yes and no," it answered carefully. "I would not intervene in your slave trade unless it was egregiously cruel. If your slaves are treated fairly and have a chance to earn their freedom, I would not interfere. After all, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, as they say. Next question, it continued. What is the highest level of advancement you have achieved in alchemy? She was taken aback by the question, alchemy being a field few dared to delve into, known mostly to those considered mad or unstable. I'm sorry, alchemy? She hesitated, struggling to translate his request. You mean the study of creating things? Not just alchemy, but also agriculture, military strategy, sociology, and basic earth magic, it clarified vaguely. I apologize, she admitted. I'm having trouble understanding. Are you referring to basic alchemy? The creature sighed and scratched its chin, seeming perplexed. Let me rephrase. How many of your people can read, write, and perform arithmetic? She was again caught off guard. Approximately 6%, mostly among the lower nobility and above, she ventured uncertainly. Jason stared at her for a few moments longer than she found comfortable, then sighed and retreated a few steps, settling onto a pew. He groaned before looking back up at her. What is the best armor money can buy in your world? Certainly. Here's a rewritten version of the text with a detailed explanation. Currently, a mail with armor plate costs about 7 gold coins. But only upper nobles can afford it, she said after a moment's pause. Suddenly, she heard it groan and leap to its feet, spinning sharply and kicking the pew. This caused it to slide backward a considerable distance of 5 or 6 feet, which, given the solid stone material it was made from, terrified her. However, she caught its muttered words as it spoke to itself, 13th to 14th century, which means household knights, men-at-arms, and stupid peasant levies. Then, it turned to her. Nobles, what are the ranks and privileges? She took a deep breath to calm herself, then glanced at the cracked pew it had kicked, before looking back at the creature. There is my mother at the top as the queen, then my eldest sister as the crown princess, followed by duchesses who govern regions in my mother's name, countesses who manage territories, baronesses in charge of castles and small thieves, and ladies who oversee towns or small cities, she explained. It nodded as it listened intently, clearly absorbing the information. Each one is responsible for paying taxes to the one above, with the exception of my sister. They are also tasked with maintaining an armed force during peace and must raise a levy during wartime, she finished, looking up at it expectantly. Yeah, that's what I figured. Just wanted to confirm, it replied calmly. I'm a bit surprised that you're ruled by a female, but I'm not here to judge, especially considering your nation's name as Queen Dumb. It quickly added, why not? Women possess great mana and can manipulate magic more easily, she remarked, faster than she had intended. She shuddered as it glanced back at her, sending a rush of fear through her. Her mana hadn't recovered enough to escape it yet. I'm not complaining or criticizing. I'm unknown, so I'm used to the idea and am fine with it. As long as you respect the fact that I am a man, it replied calmly. Liani studied it again. It was nothing like a man, or maybe it was. Her people's men were typically smaller than her and lacked mana. If it were a man, she felt it would be somewhat attractive. However, something else caught her attention. Its last bit of information. What does that word mean? She asked, after maneuvering around the unknown term it had mentioned. It seemed slightly taken aback, then smiled. Oh, I guess that concept wouldn't exist here without widespread dissemination of information and communication. Think of it as a scholar who reads extensively and studies arts purely for entertainment. That's why I didn't find it odd to be summoned after my death, just a bit surreal. Or the fact that you're ruled by a female, or much else, it said cheerfully. Liani tried to imagine the idea of reading and appreciating art to the extent that being summoned wouldn't be strange, even though it hailed from a world without mana. However, she sighed, as most books she read pertained to history, facts, or religious texts. She cleared her throat to get its attention. One last question. The power I've granted you allows you to create any and all weaponry or armor you desire, and you can destroy them too. What are your limits? Liani wasn't sure how to answer this. Though she had bestowed this boon upon it, its true workings were basic, despite being capable of creating a staff that slew raiders with thunderclaps, a melee weapon that disintegrated others, and a weapon that breathed torrents of fire like a salamander. I'm not sure anymore. Your method of warfare is completely different from what I had anticipated, she admitted. I had hoped for a knight in golden plate armor, yet I got you. Despite that, you've fulfilled my requests and dispatched my enemies effortlessly. Your weapons resemble the battle staves of my people, yet are far stronger. Furthermore, the last weapon you used, the one that breathes flames like a salamander, makes me uncertain of your limits. But I suppose we could conduct a quick test. The creature raised a quizzical brow, but waited for her to continue. She realized a moment later that it was waiting for a signal. Try creating the simplest and most advanced weapons you can think of, she suggested. The creature stretched its arms outward, and after a brief moment, 2 weapons materialized in its hands. In its left hand was a simple stone spear, reminiscent of those used by primitive island tribes. In its right hand, however, was an oversized battle axe, with a head as large as the creature's head, joined to the shaft by a box-like structure. The entire weapon was crafted from a type of intricate gold, adorned with heraldic icons. The handle resembled that of a lever. The creature glanced at the simple spear and smiled, then turned its head and released the massive axe. Its expression was a mix of shock and awe as the weapon hit the ground with a resounding clank. It stared at the weapon for several seconds, which stretched into half a minute, before it moved over and lifted the weapon. Liane noticed it held the weapon with a reverence akin to a temple ceremony for a holy sword. It leveled the weapon and placed its fingers on the lever, but hesitated, looking back at her. Does this power make the weapon safe for me to use, for safety reasons? It asked. She pondered the question but found no immediate answer. I don't know. That weapon looks like a cross between your staff and a battle axe, she said, watching as it dismissed the weapon and summoned a new battle staff. This one appeared green for the most part, with a golden skull and wings on its sides. The creature leveled it as it had with the first staff, then did something that emitted a beam resembling a disintegration ray, melting a hole into the side of the building. The creature dismissed the weapon and turned back to her, wearing a grim expression. It spoke slowly and deliberately. This power is incredibly potent. Not only can I create weapons that my kind use in battle, but also those from basic understanding. I can wield any weapon I comprehend, including those depicted in books and games set in the distant future of my world. They are powerful compared to what my nation currently employs. Such weapons would overwhelm us. Liane shuddered, collapsing to the ground as her mind processed something she hadn't anticipated. It could create weapons it deemed too dangerous, ones it had to ask her permission to wield safely. Weapons not used by its people. She looked up at it, and a chilling thought crossed her mind. Should it discover her attempt to enslave it, it might turn those formidable weapons against her and her nation.